Okay, broadcast is live.
All right, we are live. We are live. Now let me see if there is a way for me to. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we have any viewers yet, but we will just go ahead and get started.
Okay.
And as people join, feel free to be sure to comment, drop comments in the chat, and engage with us. But welcome to our live session. Anita and I called this session "No One Taught Me How to Grieve." And we are just so excited to be here today to share our stories, to share our wisdom, to share our journeys with mindfulness and grief management. And so, a quick little anecdote before I pass it to Anita to introduce herself, and then I'll introduce myself as well. I'll go ahead and introduce myself now. My name is Shantae Hooks, and I am the owner and CEO of Mindful Culture Creators, where I teach and lead mindfulness in corporate spaces. I teach in corporate spaces, and it was a very simple reason why I picked the corporate arena, and that's because that's where people are, right? And I have a saying, meet people where they are, and that's where people are, and that's where I was, and it just made sense for me to use what I learned so much through my 20-year career in accounting and risk management to help people understand this very important topic of mindfulness in ways that resonate with them. And I just sort of developed the knack after speaking and teaching and leading sessions at my corporate job, which I work in financial services. After a few years of teaching, I decided to create my own company and create my own community, talking about this to broader audiences. And so that's who I am. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I have a 6-year-old son. His name is Amir, and I actually met Anita at a mindfulness conference almost 1 year ago in August, I believe it was, of last year. And she and I were just kind of sitting having coffee and identified that we had so much in common. One, that we both also teach mindfulness in corporate spaces. Two, that we both are, what we call daddy's girls. We love our fathers, but unfortunately, both of our fathers are also deceased. And we found through conversation that we shared a lot of similar paths with our father's birthdays and how they died and our presence in their lives when they transitioned on to the other side. And so after, several conversations, it just became very apparent that we needed to have this conversation with others so that people can sort of learn things that we learned. And we can learn from our community and from our viewers as well. Fair warning, I've never used the streaming platform before, so I can't really see who has joined, but I am seeing comments in the chat. So please continue to put comments in the chat. And with that being said, I will introduce Anita Barbero.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you so much for being here today. Renew Your Health is the name of my business, and life is a gift has always been my message because I truly believe that it is a gift. And through Renew Your Health, I've been able to offer so much in wellness, in the wellness space, mindful eating, mindful meditation, yoga, mindful moving, not only yoga. And I just love passing this gift along. Um, I've always been in business for myself, but took a 10-year kind of, I don't want to say hiatus, but I put it aside and went into corporate America to really get the what was necessary. And that's where I really established a mindfulness practice because that was just easier to introduce into corporate America, like I'm sure that Shantae thought as well, which combined everything that I did anyway, but just mindfulness has so many tools to go with it, that so many resources, which you'll find out today, which you'll discover that can help you on your life journey. And life, what is all a part of life is loss. And we will explain to you how we were able to use the tools and the concepts of mindfulness to help support us more on our journey. So, good morning to everyone that's saying hello in the chat. I too am not familiar with this platform, so we are going to do the best we can. Shantae has been the one that's been, I call her genius with this. I was just sitting in the background. So thank you for your presence.
Yes.
And we look forward to having your questions answered. So please put
Yes.
them in the chat.
And with that being said, if you think of any questions whatsoever as we're talking, please put them in the chat. I do want to give a quick disclaimer that neither Anita or I are therapists or healthcare professionals. Please prioritize your own mental health if this conversation gets too heavy, because this is, let's be honest, right? I'm a very lighthearted person. And so, also, a fun fact about me is I'm a Scorpio. So, if you're into astrology, you know that Scorpios like to go dark. Like we don't mind talking about things like grief and death like it's nothing. So this is not uncomfortable for me. And I imagine, I don't want to speak for Anita, but this isn't very uncomfortable for her either. However, be where you are. If this conversation gets too uncomfortable for you, feel free to take a break or indulge in the emotion that comes if you feel safe. We will do our best to provide a safe environment for you. You gave yourself permission to be here and understand that you are here under your own volition. And so we welcome your presence, but please manage your own individual mental health and prioritize that first and foremost. Another thing that I'll share is that this session will be recorded. And so we will make sure to send the links out via our social media platforms as well as through our email listings. And then finally, before I actually pass it back to Anita to really ground us in a quick mindfulness practice, I want to share, I did not share the name of my company. My company is Mindful Culture Creators. There's my website on the screen. And I am a speaker and teacher around topics that involve really connecting the dots between mindfulness and various topics that matter to us. And so grief management is one that I have a unique experience with and is a direct reflection of me actually starting a business around teaching mindfulness. It was my journey with grief that birthed this business. And so that is a little bit about my business and my company. Anita, can you please take, just a couple of minutes
Yeah.
to ground us, the audience, in a quick mindful moment?
Yes. Okay, everyone. So just bringing us into full presence so that we can kind of be here rather than where we were just moments ago or where the future will bring us. We want to be fully 100% present. So just grounding yourself by either you can close your eyes or keep a soft gaze, whatever's comfortable for you. And just allow your shoulders to fall away from your ears as you soften. Notice your hands as they rest on your lap or wherever they are. Just notice your hands. Bring your awareness to your feet and just notice your feet touching the ground or the surface beneath you. And as you sit here present in your body, just notice how you feel. Notice what's showing up. And without judging how you feel, just offer yourself loving kindness, acceptance of what's here. And now for a moment, just bring your awareness to your breath. And if you feel like you need to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, you can certainly do that. And just see what it feels like to follow the rhythm of your natural breath. As you allow yourself full presence in this moment, in this experience. Just allow that peaceful flow of energy to enter into your mind and into your body. And with that, everyone, if your eyes were closed, just open them, and you can maybe shrug your shoulders or stretch a little bit. And now we're fully present and awake and for this session that hopefully you'll get a lot out of.
First
Thank
of all,
you.
thank you, Anita, for sharing your gift with us. And if you felt gratitude during that session, please share it, verbally and in the chat, so that we can receive your grateful energy. Gratitude is a big part of this conversation, as well as loving kindness, as well
Mm-hmm.
as acceptance. Anita said some key words there. I just want to share quickly what sort of came up for me, because this is really important. We're going to be talking about mindfulness, and we're going to be sharing with you, really under the assumption that maybe you don't practice mindfulness a lot. Maybe you don't even really know what it means. And so, to really ground us in that, what is mindfulness? My definition is being in the present moment on purpose with an attitude of non-judgment. And so it's really important to reflect. When you said notice your feet on the ground, I currently have my left leg crossed over my right leg, and my right foot was the only foot on the ground, and it was sort of
That's
crooked.
right.
I noticed that I'm a little bit slew-footed, and so it was sort of facing inward. And as soon as you said that, I straightened it to make it go straight. Just felt like the right thing to do. And then I rubbed my feet. I could feel I'm barefoot right now, so I could feel my toes. I'm doing it right now, just rubbing the hardwood floors. And so there's this tension. That was the word that came to my mind, almost like a tension between my bare feet rubbing against the wooden surface. And so the reason that I'm saying this is because sometimes the way that you can continue to practice mindfulness throughout your life, and even or rather, especially in moments that relate to this conversation, grief, death, the stuff that's hard in life, you want to develop the practice tools so that when the hard stuff comes, you just kind of kick in naturally.
Right.
That's my perspective. Anita, any
Yep.
reaction to what I just said?
Yeah, no, it's so true, Shantae, that a simple practice of mindful meditation, and that is the difference um, with meditation versus mindful, because you're mindful about the way you feel. And you're not judging it. You're not saying, I shouldn't feel this way. Why? You can question it. Why do I? That's the investigation piece. And even that investigation piece keeps you present and curiosity is a huge piece of mindfulness. It's okay to be curious, but it's not okay to be so negatively critical of yourself. So that's where the judgment piece comes in. And when you do the body scan, it's giving you an opportunity to go inward and stay there and acknowledge your feelings, but to say it's okay because this is how I feel, not how I should feel. This is how I feel.
Yep.
And that's what grounds us in our mindfulness practices. And you're correct, Shantae. It, it's important to have the meaning of mindfulness, which is paying attention on purpose to what's happening now, what's happening in our bodies. How do we feel? How do our minds feel? It's really important.
Yes. And I'm going to type that definition and put it in the chat for those that are maybe more visual learners. But before I do that, Anita, let's start with, tell us more. Anita and I are really, this is meant to be conversational. And so she's going to start. I want you to start with sharing a personal story about an experience that you had with grief and how mindfulness specifically helped you in that sort of grieving process. Just share a little bit with the audience about mindfulness and grief and how the two have intertwined and showed up in your life.
So I'll start with my dad. And thank you for the comments. I know you're going to read them, but thank you for the gratitude comments that Shantae brought to your attention. I'm grateful, and she'll take these other ones. And because I can't multitask too well, read and talk at the same time. So you've got this right, Shantae. This comment
I
here.
think so. I hope I have
Yeah.
a transcript.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay. Um, so my mindfulness journey prepared me so much for the death of my dad and the loss of my dad. It really did. I had been practicing mindfulness probably for about 6 years before he passed. Um, and the tools that it gave me were so valuable. And one being that I embraced my sadness. I embraced my whatever emotion I was feeling at the time. I embraced it. I didn't try to escape it. And it didn't matter around what others were telling me around me. I embraced it. My sadness, but also the fact of accepting that my dad, because I had some preparation that my dad um, was, going to pass. It was Alzheimer's, and he started to develop kind of at age 75 Alzheimer's, but then it accelerated, and they actually named it. He died of accelerated Alzheimer's. So I had this probably 2 month window of time where I knew that it wasn't looking good. And during that time, it was acceptance of that and acceptance of my sadness, even of my resistance. But then to offer myself loving kindness and the space that I needed during the time of his death. And I was blessed that I was able to be with him during that time that he passed, during that 3 month period. And when I was with him, I was so present and it was so beautiful. And whatever I felt, it was okay because I used my mindfulness practice.
Mm.
What I can tell you is that one of the most beautiful things is when he was in a home where he would do his final passing. I would, and I when I knew I needed to step away, and I could, I did physically. I could feel it in my body, the tension, the sadness, the stiffness. And I would just walk outside, and outside there was a labyrinth outside of, was that a gift? I mean, there was a labyrinth outside. So daily, I've walked in the labyrinth. It's exactly right. It's so important to feel your feelings and to act on them, and to respond. So when I went out and I walked in that labyrinth, what did I do? What fills my soul? It's prayer. It's talking to God. To me, it was God.
Mhm.
To you, it might be your higher power,
Mhm.
but that's where the spiritual really meets. And, meeting your spiritual self is so, which had already been there because of my meditation and mindfulness practices, but acting on it. So walking in the labyrinth. And I can remember feeling so drained, so tired that I would lay on the bench after I walked and I would just lay there open, just like, please give me the strength to deal with this sadness and to this loss. I just wanted to make them better. I just wanted to hang on. And I knew that wasn't going to happen. So just give me the strength. And I just feel I got the strength from all that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow, what a story. And thank you for sharing that. And a couple things that stood out to me while you were speaking was when you said you embraced your emotion and your sadness, and lots of people really resonated with that. Um, my story is actually a little different. I did not. When my father passed, I was not practicing mindfulness, and that's why it's so interesting because I can really articulate the before and after,
Mm.
right? How I managed my grief before practicing mindfulness versus how I practice or how I manage my grief now that mindfulness is not just a practice, it's my lifestyle. Um, and to really echo what you said, uh, I did not at the time when my father was also terminally ill. He also received a prognosis, and was in hospice and was given, we were prepared for his death. And that's something that came up as you were speaking. That is one thing I always knew. I've always been very spiritually connected, and I knew that it was a gift to be able to be prepared for my father's loss. And so, a piece of wisdom that I will share with you that is beyond even grief management, but really seek the hidden gifts and hidden blessings in life, right? Because while it was hard to see my father suffer for so long, like really see him emaciate,
Mhm.
right? See him waste away to nothing, because he held on to the very, very end, and he was at home. He did hospice at home, and he was a real shell of himself. And that was really difficult. But man, the fact that we were able to prepare a calm space for him, my stepmother, who was his primary caretaker and just such a beautiful soul, she had soft music playing. She chastised people if they were not respecting the peaceful environment. She showed her anger, right? And she showed her emotion very overtly. And sometimes it made us feel uncomfortable, but it was so necessary because she wanted to protect the peace of that environment. And I was lying on the couch, taking a nap right in front of him when he finally passed away. And of course, it was sad, right? If you don't know my story, my father was a professional kickboxer. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in his early years, and later in life, he was actually hit by three cars while driving his motorized scooter to the local YMCA, because my father was actually a very mindful man. He meditated, he practiced martial arts, he took care of his body, and even in his dealing with MS, he kept swimming as a lifestyle habit. And so, unfortunately, he was in this terrible accident that just caused him to deteriorate, similar to what you said, Anita. Slowly deteriorate over the span of, I think it was 14 years. I get the
Wow.
numbers mixed up. Um, and so it was incredibly sad, right? This was all happening between my senior year of high school and early adulthood. And it was extremely sad. And no one taught me how to grieve, right? No one
Mhm.
taught me mindful. Even though my father was a practitioner, he didn't teach me these things. And when I would have probably gone to him as a student, he really couldn't talk anymore. He lost his ability to speak. And so, long story short, I suppressed my grief up until, really maybe 4 years after he died. That's when life started to get difficult. I had a son, I was in a new career. My personal relationship with my significant other was failing, and I was really missing my father throughout all of this. And when everything just changed, right? Like 6 months, really like 6 or 9 months before COVID, life just got really difficult and mindfulness found me, right? And I started to notice how it would come up in, these conversations around acceptance and emotional management and not suppressing your emotion. I was one of those people that would say, I'm so sorry I'm crying, or, oh,
Right.
I don't want to cry, right? Like, really, that's how I was sort of brought up. And now I'm learning, oh, you kind of have to do the opposite. And so I started to actually practice with him in mind. And it brought me closer to him spiritually. It brought me closer to God spiritually. I always say one of the biggest benefits of mindfulness for me was improving my relationship with spirituality.
Mhm.
It created a space for me to not just pray or evoke the memory of my father in a sort of shallow way, because my mind was thinking about 50 other things, right? Work and children and life and blah, 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 what I'm going to cook for dinner, that is blocking my ability to connect with my father, is blocking my ability to show that emotion. And as you just said, that's so important. And so when I started practicing, I started to evoke his emotion, and it would just spill out. Like it would, spill out in the most, not extreme ways, but in ways that felt a bit extreme. And I would just tell myself, I'm safe. I'm
Mhm.
safe. No one's judging me. I'm in my room by myself. It's okay to cry that your
Yeah,
father is dead. That's the thing that you probably should cry about, right? When you need
totally.
to. And so that's kind of how the two link for me.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful story. And um, Shantae, and I'm just going to comment on what Barbara said in the comment while you were talking. I was able to kind of read it quickly. And she was with her mom when she passed. And it was one of the most memorable moments. Yeah. And truly, you're so grateful for that experience. Both Shantae and I were in that position. Like, I was there when my dad passed too, and to be there in that moment of passing and in their last breath here on earth was, I mean, something we couldn't take back like we wanted to, but something that we could be there with. So it almost feels like a part of you goes with them, but then a big part of them stays with you. And that's kind of how I felt. I don't think that has anything to do with the mindfulness experience, so to speak, but just the experience of being present in that transition over to the next life or whatever we believe in, you know.
Yeah. And
So
thinking about that, Anita, let me ask you a question. So, because you've mentioned presence a few times, um, talk to us a little bit about how grief will sometimes bring about overwhelming emotions, right? Overwhelming feelings. Sometimes when you least expect it, right? You could be in the middle of the grocery store. For me, it would be holiday shopping. I remember that was one of the first times when my father passed away. I was holiday shopping. I always have a ton of people to shop for because I have so many siblings and so many parents. I have four parents and I have two
sweet.
step parents. So I'm
Sweet.
very blessed. But as a
Yeah,
child, it's a very
totally.
overwhelming thing to have to shop for four parents and five siblings.
Right.
Right. And so I was doing my Christmas shopping and, kind of being annoyed. And then I remember, wait, I have one less person to shop for. And I remember I had to kind of pull myself and get emotional just thinking about it. I had to pull myself to the side. And so sometimes those overwhelming emotions can come, yet you speak of presence, right? And how important that is. Can you just talk a little bit about, how managing those distressing thoughts or those feelings, those emotions, how that connects with presence?
Yeah. So, presence, being fully present to what is happening
Yeah.
in the moment now. We don't have control over when these emotions show up, so to speak. But when we're mindful and aware that they are coming up at particular times, which is phenomenal, right? Like when you were shopping for, your dad, one less person, that's something to pay attention to because it's present in you and you honor that and without dismissing it, but it can be, and at first it's a loss. So again, we're experiencing loss, right? The presence of loss, and it is, and it's that full acceptance of what's there. And I just think that mindfulness cultivates self compassion.
Yeah.
So when you integrate that in whatever feelings you're feeling at the time, self compassion, then you know that it's okay to be present with that feeling and to, again, embrace the presence of that.
I love
And
that.
there's no other way, like, you can't suppress it, you can't diminish it, you can only be present with it and do whatever it takes to step aside. For me, it's different things, and they will always come up, Shantae. I don't think they will ever leave. I did lose a brother at age 32. I'm 62 right now. We were only 11 months apart, he and I. So it's been quite a while now. But I can still, he died, he passed on Christmas Eve. And my prayer at the time, and I was only into meditation, not mindfulness, was that I wouldn't not I wanted to love the holiday, that Christmas holiday, because we celebrate Christmas. Whatever you celebrate, I didn't want to fear it or be sad about it so much. So, blessings did come from that open prayer. And, but every time his birthday approaches, every time I hear a song, we loved celebrating Christmas together as kids, I still get emotional. But it's my memory of emotion of him.
Yeah.
And with my dad, I used to run races with him. We were very athletic together. And, so now when I'm entering something athletic that he would have been by my side, I think of him. And I think that's beautiful to have that memory, like people, there's no, like, nobody taught us how to grieve, but however we put this memory of our loved ones inside of us or on the outside, wherever we see them, is them. my favorite saying is, wherever I am, my dad is.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Wherever I am, my dad is now.
Yeah.
Because he when he was alive, he couldn't be with us everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So now the spiritual side of us says, wherever I am, he is. And I can talk to him anytime. So that's wherever I am, dad is. Yeah. And wherever, you know, so whatever. And that's because our relationships were good, though,
Right.
right?
Right.
There could be people sitting here in this conversation that didn't have great
Yep.
relationships with their loved ones that passed. And that's something that you can also pay attention to.
That's right.
In other words, that's you can't dismiss it. And you can't force yourself to love or to make that different.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone's sitting here that didn't have that same love relationship with their loved, with their one that passed, then you have to pay attention to that. That's all I can say to that,
I love that.
Shantae.
I love that. Thank you for that response. I love wherever I am, dad is. I'm going to write that down and put that somewhere. That's a beautiful affirmation
Mm-hmm.
of what you can choose to believe is true. And to kind of add on to what you're saying, my perspective has just totally shifted on emotion since I began practicing mindfulness meditation, not just practicing, but learning it. Right. And here's the thing, if you are new to these conversations and you're dealing with grief, understand that just the act of learning mindfulness and meditation, because so much of the education within these topics deals with emotion and
Mm-hmm.
deals with putting emotion in perspective, right? I used to be someone that would run away from my emotion. And most of us are, right? We're neurologically sort of wired to really want to sort of go to the things that make us feel good, and we determine what makes us feel good, and we determine what makes us not makes us feel not so good. And the brain is a computer, or the brain and body and heart are this like kind of supercomputer that is making decisions based on your actions, your reactions, your feelings, your emotions. And so what I learned in my journey is that emotions are clues, right? Emotions are clues, and if you ignore the clues, then you don't get the information that you need to be able to do something with that emotion, right? So when it comes to grieving, because I spent so many years just pushing it away, I never really, got a chance to really process the emotion. It's like I was
Right.
collecting data and then just putting it in a box and just keeping it in the box. But what good is data if you don't actually do something with it? And here's the thing, because someone asked a question, and I'm going to show it on the screen. What's the difference between wallowing in your emotion versus being more mindful of them? And here's how I'll answer this question, right? Again, using data as an example. If I have a big box of data or big file of data, I can spend hours and days and weeks and even years combing through that data, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure it out, and never actually making any conclusions, never actually making any decisions, never actually doing what I intended to do with that data. Versus setting aside some time. Maybe it's during meditation, right? Maybe it's when you have the ability to talk to a friend. Maybe it's when you have the ability to talk to a therapist. But setting aside dedicated time to analyze that data, right? To go through that box of data, as opposed to A, either just sitting it to the side and ignoring it, or B, the other extreme, spending hours and days and weeks and years and millennia, right? Trying, that's what I consider to be sort of wallowing in it. And again, I'm not a therapist, so take all of this as my opinion, my experience. But mindfulness is simply knowing, that the data is there, right? Mindfulness is knowing that the data is there and that the data means something. It means something. And when
Yes.
you practice, right? When you practice meditation, when you manage your mental health, right? When you do all the things that you think you need to do to manage your mental health, you actually set aside time to do those things. You actually start to learn that the emotion, you actually start to learn what the emotion is telling you,
Right.
right? For my father passed away during a time where I was going through a divorce. And so me missing him had a lot to do with my sort of perspective on men. It had a lot to do with the loneliness that I was facing in the middle of this divorce. And then,
Mhm.
10 years later, I'm another failed relationship, right? So I'm associating my father's loss with loneliness and right? All these other deeper meanings that I did not start to process, that I did not understand until I started to actually sit with it, right? Really sit with the emotion in a safe space, right? Allow myself to grieve, allow myself to cry, allow myself to actually change my mind, right? Change my mind about this notion that, oh, I'm weak if I cry. I had to change some mindsets, right? I had to change the way I thought about these concepts of vulnerability and mindfulness and sitting with emotion and how I feel, how I think I'm perceived if I do these things. I had to change my mind. And mindfulness was the space for me to analyze that data so that I could change my mind in such a way that now I'm getting valuable information from my emotion. Now I'm not experiencing so much loneliness because when it comes in, I just know what to do with it. Right. I go to practice. I know to phone a friend. I know to not phone that friend because they're actually going to make me feel worse.
Right.
I know I can call Anita, right? You know,
Yeah.
Anita, I need a meditation, right? I need something. I'm always giving. I need someone to actually give me,
Right.
hold space for me, right? And so that's some advice that I'll give you is one, set aside time to process your emotion, right? And it doesn't have to be hours or, 10 minutes, right? We're going to do a practice at the end of this session that is a loving kindness. And actually, I want to flip it back to Anita to talk a little bit more about what loving kindness meditation is. But set aside time to feel because many of you may be actually not feeling and not noticing, right? Because you haven't cultivated the skill of noticing through mindfulness if you don't practice. So you're not feeling, you don't notice that you're feeling, therefore you're missing the clues. Set aside time in a non overwhelming space to feel, process the clue, and then go on about your day, right? Go on about your day knowing that you're doing the work, you're doing the programming in the background.
Right. So that's such good advice, Shantae. I hope it helped Modupe. Are we pronouncing that right? I hope it helped you um, with that question because that's such a big difference. Wallowing in your emotions is what we could do, but when we develop a mindfulness practice, which are the tools and the resources, we notice them and we embrace them with a loving kindness and with a curiosity. We with a curiosity we will act on it. So what does that mean? Does it mean just accepting them? Does it mean I better go to a grief counseling session? I better, talk to a loving friend or, whatever. But when we investigate with a curiosity and a loving kindness without judgment, we're able to process those emotions. There lies emotional intelligence, right? So it brings in this level of emotional intelligence. That's correct. Emotions are clues. But we can you as you know, thoughts and emotions, we can get entrapped by our thoughts and entrapped by our emotions where they have a stronghold on us.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want that.
Right.
When my brother died, I didn't want to not look forward to Christmas again or to the holidays or to things that were special. So I had to get that emotion, a handle on that emotion, and not wallow in the timing of it, in the grief of it, but paying attention to it. What's my prayer? What's my ask? And it was that, so that all the time, every Christmas now, it's like an angel. I mean, I love looking forward to Christmas because he's my Christmas angel. Do you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
absolutely.
And so it's just paying attention and recognizing, but offering yourself such a loving kindness and saying to yourself, it's okay.
It's
I'm
okay.
okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. That's a big
Mm-hmm.
piece of loving kindness. And
Yeah.
just like you said, noticing, just mindfulness raises your awareness
Right.
of what's happening now, emotions and thoughts.
Yeah. And that's so important. And I'm a data person, right?
Yeah,
And
I can
what you
tell. It's
said is
awesome.
really important. Mindfulness raises your awareness because the data says that around 50% of the time we are operating on autopilot, meaning that our awareness is low, right? Meaning that we are not we are not mindful. We're not in a mental state because mindfulness is a mental state, a mental, emotional, spiritual. You mean a lot of different ways you could think about it, but it is a state of being. And the data says that around between 40 and 50% of the time, on average, right? And that's not when you're dealing with grief. The number is probably a lot higher. That number was probably a lot higher when my father first passed away, or maybe when your father first passed away, Anita. Um, where you are just, so you know how we do, especially as women, I'm just going to stay busy. I'm going to do more work. And you have to be mindful of that so that you can actually make a decision that is in alignment with your health. Another reason this topic is important to me is almost a year ago, actually, it was on June 30th, another significant death occurred in my life where my friend, my mentor passed away on a Zoom call, something like this, unexpectedly, right? I'm on my one on one with him, and literally he lost consciousness and died. And I somewhat watched him die, right? And it was extremely difficult to process that. And my go to, even that I was practicing mindfulness, I was teaching, I still just kind of wanted to keep going. And I had some very trusted friends, mentors, angels that said, maybe you should take some time off. And that led to me taking a sabbatical from my corporate job because I knew I just needed time. I was not, I was starting to develop a lot of negative thoughts, and I would have been no good at work, right? I just would have been no good. I accepted that, right? In loving kindness. And luckily I cultivated great relationships and sort of was in the right place at the right time to where I could actually tap into a sabbatical, right? Tap into the resources, right? The resources that exist, because around us, we're surrounded by resources. We're surrounded. If you have a job, 9 times out of 10, your company has an EAP, right? An employee assistance plan.
Right.
And if you're not an employee, right, you find the resources, right? Google is a great, resource. I mean, mental health is at the forefront of our conversation in society in a way that it just wasn't when my father passed away. And so I tapped into the resources, and life has been incredibly blessed because of it. But that's because my perspective on death has changed, right? I understand now that death is simply transformation, right? Death is change, right? Something, in order for something to change, something has to die, something has to end. And I learned that, from my father, but probably more directly from watching my manager pass away. The fragility of life. We hear that all the time. Life is fragile. Life is short. And I interpret that now as the analogy I sometimes use is the life is fragile cup, and you drop it on the ground and it shatters into 30, 50 pieces. It is no longer a cup. It's changed, right? And you could be angry that you don't have a cup, or you could just accept that the cup is no longer a cup. It's a pile of glass. And you can choose to do something with that glass. You can choose to pick it up. You can choose to piece it together. You can choose to make art with it. You could choose to do a lot of things with this information, but understand that it's neither really bad nor good that the glass broke. Just accept that it broke, that it changed, right? And that's a process. I'm not expecting anyone to get that right now, but understand that just by definition, that is what we're talking about. And loving kindness, mindfulness practice, which is, to kind of ground you in what that means, that is when you invoke an image of either another person that you love, or maybe someone that you don't love, right? Or maybe someone that you don't have positive associations. This conversation is really rooted in both of us having amazing relationships with our fathers, but we understand that many of the people in the audience right now may not have that relationship with the person that they're grieving right now. They may not have an attitude of loving kindness.
Right.
And the practice of loving kindness meditation gives you space to feel that emotion, gives you space to feel the emotion of the person that you love, the person that you maybe don't feel so happy about, but most importantly for yourself. And so we're going to do that practice in a second. But I just want to share that I did this practice not really knowing that I was telling Anita, I kind of laughed. I didn't even know that when I looked back and read the script of the practice, I was like, oh, I didn't know that that was a loving kindness practice. But when I did it, it changed everything, right? It literally changed everything, because I said at the beginning of the practice, I give myself permission to feel whatever emotion comes up. I'm just going to allow it. I'm not going to push it away. I'm not going to, I know that I'm safe, right? I'm not going to lose control. I'm not going to turn this into wallowing into my emotion, but I am going to feel this. I did it. And then I feverishly journaled after I did it. I still have the journal entry. And I go back to that journal entry often as a reminder that I can do that at any time. I can do that at any time. Just evoke the thought, the memory of my father, of, maybe people that have passed that I don't associate with in a positive way. I can evoke that memory and know that I'm okay. I also just want to, before we transition to the practice, I want to send just loving kindness to Latrika. It sounds like maybe you woke up last week to some unsettling feelings of grief. Whatever you're going through, I hope that this session was helpful to you in you dealing with all the things that you're dealing with. And to anyone, I understand if you came to this session, you might be grieving right now, or you may be dealing with someone that's grieving. So
Shante, can I just, before you go into your loving kindness, I just want to share one story. And I just want to say first that what you experienced with your boss or with your manager, when you told me that story and when you were sharing it just now, it just sent chills through my whole body because I just to be in that experience, I don't know what I would do, and that's where we want to also communicate that mindfulness is a tool, and we hope that it will kick in at the right time, but who knows? You know what I mean? Something like that is so kind of on the spot and tragic and so unexpected, and so and just afterwards, when you were able to say, okay, I think this is time for a sabbatical, because that was a very traumatic experience, very traumatic. And if I have a feeling that if you didn't take your sabbatical, you would be in a different boat right now, mentally, emotionally. You wouldn't be as settled because you took time to self care and to grieve in the proper way. So I just want to share a quick story with my dad. At the time when he passed, I had just gone through knee surgery and it was an unsuccessful knee replacement. And I had my mom who was also dementing and not handling things well. So, and I was pretty much the only sibling around in town. And so had to juggle all this stuff. So I didn't have a lot of time to actually grieve, although I handled his death well up to until he died, and how we did the memorial, all of that, wonderful. But then I noticed as months went on, I didn't give myself time to really grieve. So I said, I need to go on a retreat, which I was very used to going on silent retreats. And that's one thing that mindfulness teaches you. And if you become mindfully certified, you have to go on these silent retreats, which I enjoy anyway, because it's a time to just be by yourself, nothing else, and be with your feelings and process. So I went on a 7-day silent retreat, and I ended up going to a place that a retreat house that my dad always went to. They share the mindfulness space, shares where he used to go on his retreats. And when I was there, I even thought that I was probably in the same room that he was in when, I just had this feeling. So I found myself going to places that he would go to rather than the labyrinth that I would have chosen to go to. I went to walks where he would have gone. And it was as a Catholic retreat, So I don't want to get into all of this, but that's how I was raised. And so I found myself going to where he would be. And one day I was sitting on a bench, just breathing. And I said, I'd love to do something for my dad just to honor him. What would that be? And I was sitting on this bench, and then I'm like, oh my God, why don't I create a bench for him in his memory, overlooking the area in this retreat house that he would want to be at? I called some friends when I got home that knew my dad well. Long story short, because the bench was really expensive, we raised enough funds and the bench is there. And I go back and I sit on that bench and in loving memory of, and how beautiful was that? It was just, so that was what I was, when I noticed that I needed time to grieve and the space, the emotional space, that's what came up. So that was a gift, right? And for you, look at the gifts that came to you
Yeah.
when you took that sabbatical.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Huh? I mean, you were just beautiful. So the message I think to everyone is do what you need to do
Yes.
to self-care and to self-love and to embrace your grief, to get help when you need it, and just grieve and accept the blessings that will definitely be there. That's
Mm. Just have to pause on that. That's beautiful. And I think what it makes me think about, it reminds me that mindfulness is a lifestyle, right? This is a lifestyle that we're talking about. Loving kindness can be a practice and it can be a lifestyle, because that's what you did. You stepped into loving kindness with your dad, and you didn't just do it in practice. You did it in 3D reality in real life by gathering others to invoke the memory of your father through donation,
Mhm.
right? Through service, right? Through gifting, and it created this physical memory. It created this physical event in loving kindness.
In
And
love.
so that's what we're talking about. If you don't experience your emotions, you don't get a chance to invoke the memory of your loved one. And that's what was so special to me in understanding that every time I was suppressing my emotion about my father, or even with Greg, my manager that passed away, and I have beautiful, beautiful memories of both of them. They're both very important men in my life. Every time that I was denying their memory, I was denying their presence.
Hmm.
Every time I was denying their memory, I was denying their presence. And
Yes.
so I choose to actually practice with their memory in mind, so that I am creating their presence.
That's
And
beautiful.
that's thank you. And that's what we're going to do now. I want to make sure that we have a few minutes.
Yes.
I'm not going to make this a long practice, but I want to give you a feeling for what a loving kindness practice feels like. And so, what I ask that you do right now is just ready yourself. There's nothing that you have to do, just wherever you are, just take a pause. And I don't even want you to close your eyes yet. I want you to, one, just understand that there is no expectation here. You may get emotional, you may not get emotional, accept whatever comes. And in order to prepare us for acceptance, let's start by just noticing everything that's around us. Notice any sounds, notice any thoughts. And now tune in a little deeper and become aware of your emotional state right now. Just simply noting any emotions, maybe even recalling any feelings as you listen to this conversation without judgment. Breathing gently on your own, no special way to breathe here. Notice your body. And if your eyes are open, I invite you to close them, just to give you space to close off your outside environment. Now that you've made note, you've sort of created a mindset of presence. Go ahead and close your eyes. And I want you to say this to yourself, either out loud or in your head. As I enter this practice, I give myself permission to feel. Every emotion is welcome right now. I am safe. My emotion is welcome, and I am safe. Now, as you have made that agreement with yourself, I want you to bring to mind someone that you care for deeply. Maybe they have passed on, or maybe they're still here physically. Just think of someone that you care for. It could even be a pet. You may find it difficult to evoke the sense of imagination and visualization of this person. Don't try too hard. Find an image that suits you and hold your attention there for a moment. As you settle on that image or that vision of this person that you care for deeply, I invite you to repeat out loud or in your mind, thinking of this person as if they were sitting in front of you right now, saying freely to them, may you experience joy. May you experience peace. May you be free from suffering. May you experience joy. May you experience peace. May you be free from suffering. Perhaps this made you emotional. And if you feel like you may want to cry, allow it. Recognize that all emotions are normal parts of the human experience. They serve in purpose to connect us. You gave yourself permission to feel. Honor it. As we close out this practice, I want you to, before we close out, actually turn your attention to yourself. Visualize yourself in any way that feels good, noticing any thoughts or emotions at the idea of visualizing yourself. Settle on the image of you, and with you as the focus, say out loud to yourself or in your head, may I experience joy. May I experience peace. May I be free from suffering. Once again, give yourself permission to have any emotion that comes up. Honor it. What does the sensation of love and care feel like? Notice any tingling in your body, any buzzing, any tension or release of tension. And at the presence of it all, make your way to a sense of gratitude. Be thankful for what you have. Be thankful for your experience, for this moment. You sent peace, joy, and freedom from suffering to another and to yourself. Open your eyes at that revelation. Thank yourself for practicing, and thank you for practicing with us. Now that was a quick thank you, Anita. That was a big, just
That was beautiful.
thank you. And that was meant to really just give you a chance to feel. I hope you felt it.
Awesome. It was awesome.
I don't know if this is going to cut off right at 1. So I want to make sure I say that Anita and I do this. We teach this. So if you're interested in bringing a session to your organization, feel free to check out our websites, our email. You can find us on LinkedIn or all the places that you use to sign up for this. But before we go, I want to make sure to give you a moment to capture how you feel right now. and just drop in the chat how you feel.
And thank you for your comments. The last one that was in there,
Yeah.
how things deeply resonated with you and your mom, and prayers to you as well.
Yeah. The comments are
Katie
beautiful.
was there. Oh my God.
Yeah, the comments are beautiful. Lots of thank yous. We appreciate your presence. Sharita, hi.
Sweet. You're
Every time
welcome.
I was denying their memory, I was denying their presence. Yeah, yeah. Remember that. Remember
That's
these names.
beautiful. That's beautiful takeaway. That is a
Truth.
beautiful
Like,
takeaway.
how could I, as close as I was to my father, how could I deny his memory? Right? I mean, I get so much from thinking about him, right? He shows up in the most interesting ways to help me. He is not gone. My thought of of death has changed as a result of mindfulness and understanding grief. And so we appreciate you guys for
Mhm.
this. Modupe,
Yeah.
sending love and kindness to
Love.
you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Appreciate you giving this space for releasing tears. I mean, that's just, I
Yeah.
think that's so beautiful.
It is. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And I will go ahead and end the broadcast. We will send out any final words before we close out, Anita?
Just thank you. Just deep gratitude for your presence here. We're a community and we embrace how we feel.
Absolutely. And I guess final words from me is remember that emotions are clues. And when you ignore them, you ignore so much, including the presence of the loved one that you're missing, and including the lesson that you may be missing, even with, denying the feelings that are associated with people that don't feel so good. So may you be well, and we will see you at
Thank
our
you.
next event. We'll stay tuned. We're looking to
Sending love.
organize more events like this. So stay tuned.
Sending love always.
Sending love. Take
Mm.
care. Bye.